what we do, my fight partner, Steve Highbush, and I, we usually put on a dissected fight show. So one of the things that we do that also helps fulfill like some of the education requirement is we go through the anatomy of a sword. Most swords, most blades have very common ones. So I'll just go through the common points, such as like the long blade. Here, the blade has really two parts. Like the bottom half of the blade, like right at the base of the hilt to about the middle of the blade, is what we call the fort, which is the strongest part of the blade, which is where we do a lot of our parries. But fort or forte is also somebody's strong suit. So we kind of can put together that this is where we can get that phrase of the strong suit of a person or the strong part of the blade. The top half is called the foible, which includes the business end, the tip. So it's the weakest part of the blade. So somebody has a foible, somebody has a weakness. The blades usually have two sides. They have a true side of the blade, which is the side toward enemy. And then you have the false side, which is more toward you. So there's not a lot done with the false edge of the blade. We go further down the blade into the swept hilt design, which is used to protect your hands and protect your wrists. You get down here to the handle. And then on the bottom, the counterweight, most commonly called, is the pommel, used in a striking fashion to pummel someone.
Pummel, yeah.
So, but this particular swept hilt design has a knuckle bow to protect the front of the knuckles from your opponent, as well as the quillions, which stretch out across the blade to protect your wrists. So this is the most common weapon that we use for most of our fights that we have coordinated through our show. Again, we go down to even straight up melees, where if it's nice, looks like a close fist brawl, rough about. But this is the most common we use because it's the most roughly the right time period, and it's a gentleman's weapon, especially for a lot of our nobles and a lot of the nobles that are on the fight cast. This would be the most common weapon that they would have with them.
You talk about when you talk about. I'm just thinking about when you talk about footwork and things like that.
Yes,
you have to learn to carry that and to do footwork and to be balanced and all of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the great Phil Yeager, who taught me years ago, he had a really big emphasis on footwork. Footwork. If you don't know where your feet are, you're not going to be able to fight effectively. You're not going to be able to present yourself effectively. So footwork also gives us a couple of other terminologies that you can probably say might come from, such as simple, like a footwork. You're in a nice good stance and you move your back foot to the front like a step, like a common step. In the text, it's called a pass. So I've made a pass at you. So and other strong footworks, such as what we've done, if you take your back foot, you bring it forward and across your former front foot. That is called a cross. And if you do it twice in succession, you've now double-crossed your opponent. So there are other terminologies that come from the texts. Most common is, I think it's the 16th, 17th century Italian texts translated will give you some of this terminology. And you can kind of put together that. And then it's really fascinating that even these steps, such as like taking, like if you're in a stance, your front foot moves forward and your back foot follows. It's called an advanced. And if you watch that, it's interesting if you watch boxing, in modern boxing, and you watch them go after their opponents, it's the same kind of footwork that we use and describe with swordplay. Taking an advance, or, the back foot moving first and the front foot following, called a retreat. For again, swordplay. And I've seen it in boxing, which makes it fascinating that it's timeless, that these techniques, footwork is timeless in regards to any kind of combat. So, footwork is the first thing that you really learn, and we really try to emphasize, and then you start working on the rest of your body, where your arm movement is, where your blade is going to be, what are your common target zones. Now, again, we do it for safety, so we're not trying to go for your head. The head and neck region is a no-go zone for safety reasons. So we try to take our targets, such as, like, let's say the middle of the biceps is one of our cuts for an arm. But when we're taking that cut, we're trying to aim actually 6 to 8 inches away from the arm, just in case of, like, our partner forgets to parry or doesn't parry fast enough, we're not going to strike them. Because even though this is not a sharp weapon, it is dulled, it is blunted, it will still break bones. Yeah. It will still, and even though the tip is dull down to it, it can still, with enough thrust, can still penetrate.
These are not stage swords. Yes, it is real, and no, you can't touch it.
So we get those questions all the time. Hey, is this real? Yes. Can I see it? No.
Right.
Just for our safeties. Now, other shows have different rules, and that's their own. Our rules are no. If you want to see a weapon like this in its full entirety, go to our military camp where we have displays, where we have people trained to tell you about all of it, and you can see it in its full entirety in whatever scenario you want to see it in. So the only other time that we, as nobles, would pull this out would be for the children's knighting ceremony. So that way the queen uses the blade to go from one shoulder to the next and to the top of the head to knight all the kids. So that's the only time that you'll see, other than a stage show, the only other time you'll see this out is at a knighting ceremony. And so the same thing goes with daggers. Daggers will still have a blade. It'll still have a fort. It'll still have a foible. It's still got a pommel. It'll still have a little bit of a cross guard, but maybe not a knuckle bow. I didn't bring one for demonstration, but I just brought the main hand weapon. We also learned that most common people use their right hand. Their right hand is their hand dexter. And then anything else, like an alternate weapon, in their left hand is hand sinister. That does sinister deeds. So these are things we like to point out for our demonstration.
Interesting with the language. You also brought something that you made.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, throughout many years and throughout going to a lot of Ren Faire shows, you kind of pick up a few things. Some say hobbies, some say insanity. So I brought in a chainmail halberd
that you made.
That I made. Took me about 3 months of all my spare time watching a lot of TV. So it fits me. I made it for a character for a show a couple of years ago. Now, the thing with this one is I made it out of aluminum because a steel shirt of this size would weigh about 45 to 50 pounds.
That's still, though, when I wore it, was surprised at how heavy it feels.
And this is aluminum, and this is about a quarter of the weight. So this is about 10 to 12 pounds. Again, this is more and I made it for a character that was didn't have, would be not a lot of money. So they wouldn't be able to own breastplates, full plate mail. So they would be able to own something to prevent some slashing, maybe some stabbing. But an arrow will still go straight through this. But at least some other armor protection than clothing.
Good point, because if you go down to Archery Through the Ages at down in the woods, it's on twice by our archery people. She has samples of chainmail, such as Stephen's shirt, where the different types of arrow points have gone into, through, and through and through.
Oh, wow.
So you can see how it does and does not work.
Yep. So that was 3 months, a lot of handwork. So after I made this the first time, my wife tried it on, and then she wanted one of her own. So I ordered 12 more pounds of rings and started again for another 3 months. For the craziness of that, I'm not going to do that again. Once is enough, or twice is enough in my lifetime right now.
2 of them.
So now I've reduced myself down to smaller things, such as making bracelets and necklaces, mostly for my friends, but some people have kind of wanted some on pay on the side. So I've made some for friends.
You to wear something like that for 8 hours or so, I think would not only be a little bit hot, but also a little bit heavy.
Correct. Oh, absolutely. I played a character in a show for which was a gallows glass. A gallows glass is more of a Scottish-Irish mercenary, but we're talking more early Henrician, so early Henry VIII and so on. So they were mercenaries, and they were pretty much, they only had chainmail. So I made it for that character. For 8-9 hours a day, it does get pretty heavy because a lot of times people just, hey, I had enough and take it off. But with the outfit that I had on, with the belt and all the extra schmutz and having a sword on, there's a lot of effort to take it off, too. So it adds to the Ren Faire diet and workout program because we're walking all day. We're walking all the time. So we're easily getting 5 to 7 miles of walking time in that time.
Yeah.
Let alone you do it with 10-pound weight and then whatever else you have on your belt. And then a lot of times for when you eat on site, you're grazing. Like from our green room, people bring in fruits and veggies and other meats and things like that. So you're grazing kind of a healthy meal. So it's easy enough to drop 5 pounds water weight and just lose 5 to 7 pounds during a Ren Faire season, just because of all the walking, the diet, and then of course when you start adding in extra weight, you kind of lose a couple extra pounds.